Hello, I'm Hamish Sewell and I'm the founder and main producer with Soundtrails, and we're talking about the up and coming SoundWalkSeptember event where we're launching it in Uralla on the 1st of September. I think Claire Campbell from Tourist Information and my friend here who is...
Andrew Parker.
Where do you fit in, Andrew?
Where do I fit in?
Yeah.
I bloody live here. Not just a ring-in like you. Comes in and collects all the good stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, I've been here since the mid-'80s, hanging about, being a potter, not being a potter.
So you were part of a whole contingent of artists who came in here in the 70s and the 80s?
Yeah, in the mid-'80s there was I think there were about 7 or 8 potters in town when I came, and no one was earning a living in the town. They were all sending their work elsewhere, but there was a swag of like-minded people, and it was a pretty good place to be back then.
So just for listeners to contextualise this, Uralla's in New England, which is about 7 hours north of Sydney, about 8 hours south of Brisbane. It's up on the tablelands. It's quite a high altitude. It's
a couple of hours from the coast.
Couple of hours from the coast. And it's a town that's had sort of many layers of history. It's had tin mining.
Tin mining is a little bit further west. Gold mining.
Gold mining?
Yeah.
Had gold mining, yeah.
But for a very short period.
Yeah.
It's only about a 10-year window of gold mining.
Right.
Yeah.
But when your sort of cohort came into Uralla, it was very much a sort of a hippie kind of an influx, wasn't it?
I wouldn't call it a hippie influx. It was an alternate influx.
Yeah.
I don't think it's always been too bloody cold to be a hippie in Uralla.
Right. Yeah. And so you were instrumental in the Uralla Soundtrail. And by the way, for listeners out
most
there,
of it's my fault. It's totally my fault. Sorry.
Without this man digressing, I'm just going to say we were doing this oral history project in Uralla, and from out of that came this idea of building an app that could showcase some of the stories from the local town and the people that came out of the oral history work we were doing.
Yeah. So, look, if it wasn't going to happen here in Uralla, it wasn't going to happen at all, really. I mean, we did a lot of background work, and Uralla was the willing victim.
Yeah, and it was the first. It's the first of what? It's the first Soundtrail 5 years ago of 15 Soundtrails that are now in the mix, and it's growing. The next one's going to be Nanango in Queensland. That's going to launch in a week's time, and the following one's going to be Walker, which is going to be a fantastic contribution to the Soundtrails family, which is around sculptures and the artworks in the streets of Walker. So Soundtrails is forming this growing cluster, which have all sort of bloomed out from Uralla.
Absolutely. It all starts here in Uralla.
So for someone who comes to the SoundWalkSeptember event on the 1st of September, where they're going to meet at the...
Tourist Information Centre?
Visitors
Information
It's so unglamorous that compared to the stories. The Vic. So you're meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Visitors Information Centre. You'll get him, and you'll get Claire Campbell from the Visitors Information Centre, and you guys are going to take people around the streets doing the Soundtrail. Is that correct?
I think that's it. I mean, we'll pretty much make it up as we go along. It depends on whether people have a smartphone. Some maybe won't, and I've got a wireless speaker that I'll take, and so we should be able to pick up from one device and just have the speaker there for people who don't have headphones, and others can just wander off and do it at their own pace. But look, we're not really sure what will happen, because it's always it's kind of a bit of a solitary activity doing a sound walk, because you've got your headphones on, you're in your own little world, and you're immersed in the story. So it's going to be interesting to do it with a bunch of people. Never done that before.
I guess if you've got a speaker, everyone can listen as they're following you around. Otherwise, they've got the choice of being able to have. But it's not headphones anymore. It's earbuds.
No, I've got headphones.
Yeah, I know. You're old school though.
Yeah, no, they're wireless. They are wireless.
Oh, wireless.
Yeah.
So, what are we going to hear when we do the Uralla Soundtrail? Apart from you, of course, who's the narrator?
Well,
he's the narrator.
Yeah. You can switch it off after that. It goes downhill. No. Look, we'll hear about Thunderbolt. We'll hear about
who was Thunderbolt?
Well, Thunderbolt was a bushranger back in the 18. Well, you know all the
I can't
goss around here.
I think it was the 1840s. 1840s.
Fairly early on. Oh, that's really interesting.
But he was quite a famous. He was quite a famous bushranger, and Uralla's traded on that reputation as having this bushranger sort of association.
He was ambushed, tracked down just outside of Uralla and shot. So that's probably why Uralla has such a stake in the Thunderbolt story. Yeah.
But it's a lot more than just sort of historical archives, isn't it? And historical stuff. It's a lot more than that. It's not just a relay of information about history and names and dates, is it? That we're doing?
Oh no. No, they're really well nuanced little stories. They're like a historian's pop song, really.
Historian's pop song. That's great.
Well, they're 3-minute vignettes, really.
They're 3-minute vignettes. So we go from. Anything that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, look, my favourite has always got to be old Bill and Richie talking about their shearing days. Those two guys just epitomises what the Soundtrails and the story recording and recording conversations between two people. They just came in to the studio and they didn't see the equipment. They weren't fazed by anything. They were just there for a yarn, and they told the most gorgeous stories of how fine the wool was, about the drinking at the pub, about
hiding the bottle
in the bushes at the bush dances because they weren't allowed grog in the
and the pubs, the pubs, the fights outside the pubs. What was it? What he said? You had to drink out of a straw for the next week or something.
A week,
yeah, because you'd have to stand eye to eye with someone.
Your jaw would be so sore. You'd be sucking soup through a straw for the next week.
And on one hand, it's a sort of a male kind of iconic, thing that we've heard many times before. But to hear two fellas talk together.
And two old fellas reminiscing.
Two old fellas and the vernacular that they were using, which was so interesting for me because I was there at that recording, and they didn't give a rat's ass about me being there. They were basically more interested in just chewing the fat.
Yeah.
And that's, I think we've got a couple of stories with what were their names again? Bill and
Richie.
And I think we've got one at the old dance hall place, which was the Uralla School of Arts, and then we've got another one outside the old wool press place where they're talking about the sheep and the sheep industry and having to deal with daylight savings and the bloody New Zealand wide-tooth combs when they came over.
Those bloody Kiwis.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favourites is listening to Bob Faulkner, Uncle Bob, who's passed away this year. And he's talking about growing up in a place called the Panhandle, which was just on the periphery of town, with a whole lot of other sort of
family and friends.
Family and friends, but it was very much a sort of a fringe camp, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yeah.
It was a fringe camp, and those sort of camps.
It was, although there were Aboriginal people in the Panhandle, there was a reserve in Uralla that was closer to town, but the Panhandle was probably a place for, Uncle Les Townsend, who lived at West End at the reserve. His father got booted out of the reserve because he was Irish, and so I think I'm not sure whether they all went to live in the Panhandle, but
But Bob talks about getting into the old Cadillac or some sort of old car, and I think there were, there
Yeah,
were just
yeah,
kids
yeah.
strewn everywhere, and there was the dogs.
Going to the movies.
And they went to the old Western movies, and he just talked about the enthusiasm with which they all watched. I think it was Audie Murphy, when he was about to get the bad guy. And it was just this lovely moment from a story which is so often, so common.
He tells that story about his dad getting so excited he yelled out, "He's behind you, you silly bugger!"
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So these conversations and these connections that people have to the places in Uralla and the stories that sort of underwrite a town like this, I mean, they're really sort of drawn out in something like this sound trail. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's sums it all up.
So where do we go from here?
I think we're finished.
Are we finished?
Yeah, right. Let's can it there. People don't want to sit around listening to a couple of blokes like this rabbiting on all night.
White fellas. We're white fellas.
Yeah.
White fellas. We're definitely white fellas. Two white fellas carrying on.
Yeah.
So the key details are if you're wanting to experience what's going on with new versions of geolocative storytelling through smartphones, where you can walk in and out of stories, then the place to be next weekend is Uralla at the Visitors Information Centre, and you can join Andrew or Claire Campbell for an absolutely scintillating walk around, and I think you guys are going to have probably a bit of a chin wag at the end of it.
Yeah,
in Elmer Park.
Yeah. Oh, we might come back down to one of the cafes and have a yarn.
Yeah.
But 9 o'clock next Sunday the 1st.
Sunday, yeah.
So it'll be one of the first events for Soundwalk September.
Yeah. So
in the world.
Soundwalk September. I think we've got one in Armidale happening. I think it might be the 1st or the 2nd. We've got another one in Nambour in Queensland, and we're going right through. There's a string of them going through, which is celebrating these types of sound walks around the world through mobile devices. And the last one that Soundtrails has got on them in the mix is Gunny Wiggle, as far as I know, and that's on the 26th of September, which is going to be fantastic because there'll be a number of elders out on the site who can have a chat to people when you've done the walk. So find a sound trail that's happening near you as part of Soundwalk September, and download the app, check us out, and turn up on the in Uralla for Andrew taking you around the streets.
Great. See you there.
Bye bye. Stop.